Welcome back to SL Chennai Speaks Out. Child sexual abuse is still a taboo topic here in our country. There is a conspiracy of silence around the whole issue. The fault, of course, could lie within the cultural setup of our society, where most parents do not speak to their children about sexuality or even the physical and the emotional changes that take place during the growing up years. So let's start by asking our parents. As parents, do you think that you should actually discuss these issues with your child, sir?
Absolutely, you are right. We think that we should not discuss with them because I don't know how to tell them. Now, when the ad comes in the screen, the young child asks, what is that? We are shying away from that. We need to discuss with them openly and create the awareness with the child that will make them. So, for the child abuse, what are the things is not to accept? So you need to share with them. Once you share with them, they know. Otherwise, they do not even know what is the sexual abuse.
Have you done that with your children?
Absolutely, I did with
you
myself.
You did?
Yes.
That's great. Let's give him a big hand for that. Right. Sangeeta, let's ask you now. What do you advise to all the parents in this room about dealing with issues like this?
I think he's right. In terms of parents, I think it's very important that parents do it at a very developmentally appropriate age, you know. I think for what you say, tell a 5-year-old is very different from what you tell a 14-year-old. That's one issue. And if parents are not comfortable about dealing with this, or if they think, you know, they're not equipped to handle it, please don't. I mean, it becomes even more quirky when parents are uncomfortable themselves and, you know, they're going to pass on this discomfort to children, so it becomes very counterproductive. So I think if parents are uncomfortable, I think school is one of the best ways to kind of, you know, bring in sex education, where the teachers need to be trained, you know. I think that's a very important aspect.
Right.
You know,
I think it's important for us. Let's ask Usha here, as a principal of a school. In your school, for instance, do you do anything like sex education?
Yeah, we call counselors, a gynecologist who had come there from Kilpak Medical College, and she had given counseling to our students, and she told them what the difference between the good touch and the bad touch.
What about the teachers? The child is more familiar with the teacher, and if the teacher was trained to do that, would that be a better way?
That would be a better way. They are more comfortable with us. Like, if we have to tell them and we are educated in that way, and then if we pass on the information, it would be good, I feel.
Right. Let me ask the mothers here. How many mothers in our audience have actually talked to their children and given them sex education? Can I know how many? You've done it? Yes. Would you like to tell us about it, please?
I have 2 daughters. One is in BSc first year. The other is in 10th standard. I used to tell them, just you can have many boyfriends, as many boyfriends. You can just message, do whatever you want. But see that, because they message and they try to hide from me. But I tell them, don't hide from me. You just tell your boyfriend's name. I'll see whether he is good or bad. Because I know about certain children. So I'll read the message and I'll tell them. Then according to that, they'll act. So they'll never hide anything from me.
Right, but what about sex education? Did you ever do that with your daughters?
Yeah, I've not yet, but I've just warned her not to speak more to boys. Okay, that is, if they are behaving in...
So does this mean that by warning her, do you think that that is sex education for your child?
No, just we'll tell. There is, as principal ma'am told, it's only touch, good touch and bad touch. We know when a boy sits next to her, whether he's sitting as a friend or something, it is a touch. She should realize the difference.
Right. Here's a handsome young man. Would you? Well, what do you think about, you know, the kind of thing we're talking about here, where we're discussing sex education? Now, did you ever get anything like that from your parents?
Actually, I've not gotten anything from my parents, but there are some ways, like during the same, I studied in a boys' school, and I still study in a boys' school. And during my 9th standard, I remember the biology lesson where the teacher explained in detail like what is actually happening, and it was really open to the students. And as the ma'am says, like good touch and a bad touch, like I have been out of the country for a year, and everyone is just friend, and we understand what is good touch, what is bad touch as you grow on. And now when I meet anyone, we give a hug, a friendly hug, where some people over here think it's not a friendly hug, it's something really different.
Right. Usha, you're going to have a very good biology teacher, you know, because I think we have an I know, but we have an audience
I don't
here.
find a difference between a good hug and a bad hug, what you say. Where do you put an end to, like, where do you draw a line?
Right. Andal has something to say. Tell us.
I think the time has come when sex education, the practical full idea of sex education has to be made open to students, because if you don't teach it in class, they are going to get information through
Internet?
through the internet, through other channels, through movies. I mean, why should they? I mean, this is something which they should know at there's a certain age appropriate, as Dr. Sangeeta said. After a certain age, they should have their full knowledge of sex education and clear lines drawn on do's and don'ts. I think people have to be open, parents have to be open when they talk to their children on what is acceptable, what is not acceptable.
Right.
I think we have to be much more open and transparent in this whole thing. And as the principal said, schools have to provide this, because parents still are uncomfortable talking on this.
Right.
I think as part of their school curriculum, they should teach this whole idea of sex education,
Right.
particularly to the adolescent children. I think a time has come for us to be open with youngsters, not think of them as babies. I think by 12, 13, children are very well informed, and as you said, there's always the internet. If you and I don't tell our kids, they will go to the net
Right.
and get the information.
In fact, I was going to come to Sangeeta here. How old should a child be when you actually do this and impart this kind of information to a child? How much should a parent tell a child?
I think it should start as early as 3, wherein the child should be made comfortable about his own body. I mean,
Okay.
his own body image, being comfortable about what he is, and upwards, 3rd standard upwards, the schools can start imparting sexual education. And I think we needn't look at it as an isolated sex education program. I think we should incorporate healthy sexual relationships, healthy, interpersonal relationships with females. I mean, most of the time these girlfriends are just girlfriends, I mean, we make a big fuss about it, and I think this poor chap here feels, I just hugged her and what big deal, So I think healthy relationship with girls, because after all, you're going to marry a girl tomorrow, and you should know how you're going to behave with a woman tomorrow. How are we going to deal with our own children? What do we do when we are angry? I think it's the whole thing of life skills education, wherein sex education can be a part of it. So,
Right. But Sangeeta, he doesn't think that to hug a girl is a big deal. What if that little girl goes home and she says, guess what, he hugged me, and the mother gets uptight? The parents could get very uptight at that. So, sir, you're a teacher, how would you handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, that is, as Sangeeta said, it should be included in the curriculum. And it should be included in such a way that first, every child should know the anatomy of a body, not that sex education straight away. And parents are not comfortable in talking about sex education with the children, as he said. So it should be incorporated along the subject, along the syllabus from 3rd standard, so that stage by stage you can teach them what is sex education.
Right. Let me hear from you, sir.
From where we get our misconceptions. I was never taught these things from my parents like sir did with his son. I do not remember any of my biological lessons. From where I got those misconceptions?
So you tell us.
From my peers, from all my friends. I got all of misconceptions. But in our school, one day, I don't know how, they managed a seminar. At that time, we thrown about 1 million of questions, but that fellow asked us to write in paper. So after that, he came back with a presentation, taking out our questions and giving out us the perfect answers. That's how I learned, and that's how I expect we should explain anyone.
So you think that was a good way, sir?
Yeah, that was a perfect way.
You would not have preferred to have heard it from your parents about the birds and the bees? Wouldn't that have been a better way?
Yeah,
No?
exactly. That's what I'm saying. If parents are not telling us, if they are shying, if they were not exposed to a world where they were taught to tell these things to their kids. So from where we can get a solution? We have to find a solution.
Right. What about the young lady here?
I just wanted to say that you were talking about sex education from 6th standard upwards. Children who are sexually abused are as young as 2, 1, 3, and I think it's important for young children to also be, you know, the good touch, bad touch thing needs to happen at home before they even come to school, because most of the sexual abuse happens in homes with their family. And another thing is that in schools, I think it's important for teachers to be comfortable with their sexuality, and only then can they impart information and knowledge to students.
There are so many alcoholics, and I've personally had complaints from their mothers who meet me and tell me how to control this alcoholic husbands who don't know the difference between the wife, a teenage daughter, or a young growing up girl, or the servant. Very big problem which is not discussed, which they don't want to go and tell outside, that their husband is an alcoholic and he's treating his teenage daughter badly, and they have 2 bedrooms, they lock up the girl. And you know, if they are the only single room house, my servants, I have had so many servants, it's a very sad state.
Right. So I'd like to have one final comment from you before we go to the many myths that surround child sexual abuse.
I think when we talk about sex education, we also keep in mind the 40% of our population, our parents, they are not educated. So it cannot be we cannot put that responsibility on the parents. So largely it is up to the school and the teachers. That is the one point I would like to make. And the second one is, like, when we are talking about sexual abuse, there are also situations where large number of children, particularly from kind of marginalized communities, who are made to sell their bodies and who are trafficked and day in, day out, and those issues also need to be discussed, I think.
Let's now look at some of the myths that surround child sexual abuse. Abused children come from the lower economic strata, poor and illiterate. Children who play outside are the ones who are more abused than others. Children are usually not taken terribly seriously when they complain about sexual abuse. The abuser is a psychopath or an unknown person. Usually, the mother is aware that the child is being abused. Exposing this causes more harm than good. A child should be encouraged to forget the incident. We'll now take a very short break, and when we come back, we'll discuss how we can help our kids stay as safe as possible.